Because of nuclear tests, a giant monster is freed from its underground prison and started threatening human life on the planet. Our movie starts in the 50th of century with army officers throwing a bomb to kill him, a giant monster, and they follow what happened but they don't know if this monster died or not. And the years passes until we reach a year 1999 at the Philippines, and we see an American army plane transporting a scientist to a scientific research place, and the rest of the team are waiting for him to arrive. And we know when the scientist gets off the plane that his name is Shirazawa, and the person in charge starts telling him what they did in the last period, and they stored a nuclear energy source in the place, but there was a big tremor that happened that caused it to explode, and we don't know what the reason of it, but what resulted of the explosion was a very big underground cave, and they discovered an animal fossil. So Dr. Shirazawa goes down to do his research, and he discovered that the fossil is very big, to the extent that they don't know how to reach it, but he noticed that there is a broken bone that is still new, and this is almost because of the creature that went out, and we don't know what is it. And they also discovered that it's made a hole in the ground again, and if it was a road for him to go down to the sea. Then we move to Japan, and we see a scientist named Joe while he's awake early and talking on the phone because he received information about the earthquake that happened in the Philippines, and that there is a serious problem for them because this tremor is repeated in a big way. So he goes quickly and takes his wife and son with him, and this day is Joe's birthday, and his wife Sandra agrees with him that when they finish they will bring him a cake and have a party, but Joe is worried about what he heard, and he postpones everything until they are rest assured. And when they get to their base, Sandra dresses and enters to do her research on the station. As for Joe, he's following the situation from afar and assigns all officials big orders to contain the issue, but suddenly they find a big shake happen and Sandra is locked inside the station, and this is what worries Joe very much, so he runs to check on her and he asks her to get out quickly from the station before the radiation affects her, and he runs quickly to have time to get her out before she dies, but unfortunately the radiation reaches her, and he asks Joe to lock the gate on her and the rest of the team so that they don't transfer the radiation abroad. And after a while he finds his wife standing behind the door, but it's too late, so she asks him to take care of their son Ford, and the gate closes on her and she dies. Then the whole country is in a state of emergency because of radiation and literally disrupt everything, and we find Ford while he's standing watching the station from afar and thinking about his parents. After 15 years, Ford became an officer in the American army and he's taking a vacation, so he goes home and spends a nice time with his family, but unfortunately he doesn't have time to rest, and he finds a phone coming to him from Japan, and they know that his father was arrested for looting, so Ford goes quickly to get him out. After a while Ford arrives to Japan and goes to get his father out of prison, so the police releases Joe and he takes Ford to the house where he currently lives, and as soon as Ford arrives at his father's house he finds it's full of research, so he's surprised that his father is still looking for the same topic for 15 years, and he asks Joe why did he want to enter the restricted area. So Joe tells that this area is the same station where nuclear radiation happened 15 years ago, and he said that he needs to know the reason that made his wife die. And they get into a fit of sadness because they don't have any pictures of Sandra. He also said that he wanted to prove to the government that what happened that day wasn't an ordinary earthquake, and that the one who caused this earthquake was a giant monster, but the government didn't want to spread the news so that he doesn't cause them problems. Next day Joe prepares himself again because he's going to the same area to look in it, so Ford tries to stop him, but Joe is determined and he tells him that he did a lot of research and he's sure that there is a giant monster underground. That's why he must go and prove this, so Ford decides to go with him to protect him. Later, they wear anti-radiation suits and Joe gets off the boat to measure the level of radiation in the place. But he discovered that the whole place is free of radiation, So he reassures and removes the mask. And then they go to their old house, which by the way was very close to the restricted area, and they enter to search the place and find a lot of old researches. Also, for the first time, Joe finds a picture of him with his family from 15 years ago, so he is very happy. Then they watch from the window and discover that there are research laboratory working in the area. And almost the lab is secret, so they decide to leave the house, but unfortunately when they go out they find the police and they arrest them and take them to the research lab. Here we discover that Shirawaza was in charge of the factory, and when he knows that Joe is with them, he goes to talk to his assistant Vivian. So she tells that they found with Joe all the research about the place 15 years ago. So Shirawaza opens it and discovers that the monster has been in the same place for 15 years. And here they call the monster Moto because waves come out of his body that affect the electricity. And the electricity was off in the place and it came back. So they understand that Moto was feeding on the radiation that comes out of the experiments, and he has been living here for a long time ago on these rays. So the police order those in the area to vacate the place quickly. Later Ford imprisons in the car and he can't get out of it because it's closed. As for Shirawaza, he goes to the egg of the monster that they discovered and he orders his men to attack it with electric rays, so many parts of it are destroyed and the radiation level decreases a lot, so they think that the monster died finally. But suddenly they find the egg hatching and arms come out of it and the monster attacks everyone there. And we discovered that the monster was trying to break free from the egg, and when they destroyed his shell, they helped him get out, and it appears in its real form. So the electricity goes off in the place, and Joe gets out of the prison because the door was working with electricity, and when lost power, it opened. So he goes out, and he finds the monster withdrawing all the energy in the place, and he cuts the wires and takes it in his mouth. And because of this, the electricity poles fall on the car that Ford is imprisoned in. So her door opens and Ford escapes quickly, but he takes care of his father who is standing on the bridge, and suddenly he finds the bridge falling in the middle of fire, so he shouts at him, but suddenly the monster gets out one by one from behind him and starts stepping on anyone in his way. So Ford tries to run away, but the monster has wings and flies from there. Next day, a big medical team arrives to provide help, and they take Joe after he was injured, and Ford rides the car with him. But Joe had a lot of injuries, and he orders Ford to go back to his family and stay with them. Then he dies. The news of Joe's death reaches Shirawaza, so he asks to meet Ford, and he tells him that he needs with him, and they start playing the old videos of Joe. So they find many pictures of the radiation zones, and Joe explains all the reason for the exit of the monster, and Joe said that in the year 1954, at the time of the World War, there was a nuclear submarine that was in the sea, and when it exploded, it made a big monster wake up from its sleep, and this monster is called Godzilla. Godzilla and monsters like him were feeding on nuclear radiation, and because the normal atmosphere didn't have a percentage of radiation, so they were taking advantage of the presence of radiation in the water, and that's why they wouldn't get out of it. So Shirawaza tells them that 15 years ago, they found a skeleton of a monster that looked like Godzilla, but it has 2 eggs inside that still didn't hatch. One of them hatched, and Moto came out, and the other is still. When Moto came out, it starts looking for the nearest source of him that generates nuclear radiation, so it goes to the restricted zone to get his power from it, and he spent all these 15 years feeding on energy until he came out now and became a giant monster. Then Ford asked Shirawaza, since you know this monster and its place, why did you kill it from the beginning? So Vivian tells him that if they had killed this monster, a very large amount of radiation would have come out of it, and this would have affected the whole planet, so they had to leave it and do research on it. And she tells him that his father knew all this 15 years ago, and he was trying to prove this to the government, but no one believed him. So Ford is sure that his father wasn't as crazy as everyone said about him, and that he was right. Then Vivian asks him if Joe told him about any other information that would help them. So Ford surprises them and tells them that his father expected that the monster would produce waves all the time. At the time, Shirwaza suspected that the monster was talking, and that these waves are a language that he communicates with another monster like him, and he suspected that the other monster is female, and Moto was sending her for mating, but she still hasn't gone out. Later, Ford goes to the airport to return to a new mission of the American Army, and he gets to Hawaii. At the same time, scientists know that the monster is now heading to Hawaii, so they send a big team to the city, and when they arrive, they discover that the monster was feeding on a big energy source there, and Shirwaza keeps watching the atmosphere. So the devices start to give indication that there is movement coming from the ocean, and he thinks Godzilla is the one who's going to get out of the ocean. So he runs quickly to see him and sends a team from the army to face him. Later, the team that is standing with Moto, they are trying to hit him to kill him, but the monster wakes up and gets its foot up, and suddenly big waves come out of it that disrupt all the energy sources around it. At the same time, Godzilla appears out of the water, so people get out running from the place before they die, and Shirwaza is watching him from the warship, but Godzilla doesn't hear anyone, and he gets out of the ship normally. So Shirwaza knows that Godzilla has no animosity with humans, but because of its big size, while coming out of the water, it causes a big tsunami, and a lot of people drown in Hawaii because of him. Then the electricity starts to cut off in the whole city, and Godzilla appears in his normal size, so the forces start shooting at him to kill him, but he isn't affected. And after a while, the electricity returns again, and the subway that Ford is sitting in starts moving. Even Godzilla disappears again, but then Moto appears in his full form and gets close to the metro, so the army is trying to kill him, but there is no use, and Moto gets close to the metro and eating a part of it, and he tries to destroy the planes that hit him, so it causes very big explosions in the country. So they discover that it's very strong and no one can kill him. But suddenly Godzilla appears in the front of him and starts to face him, and all these reporters filming it, and they see Godzilla challenging Moto, but Moto is afraid of him and he flies to run away, and Godzilla goes down again in the water and disappears. The next day the whole country is destroyed, and Ford wants to go home to check on his family, but there is no airport workers in the city, so he finds forces from the American army walking in the country, and he knows from them that the monsters are on their way to San Francisco. So Ford asks the commander to go with them to America in his capacity as an officer in the army, so they agree. Later, Shirwaza goes to talk to the army commander and trying to explain to him that Moto wasn't communicating with Godzilla, and the proof is that when Godzilla appeared, they were going to get into a war between them, and this means that Moto was communicating with someone else like him, and at the time he remembers the second egg that he saw in the Philippines, so he suspected that this egg has a female and Moto was communicating with her for mating, and that America took this egg a long time ago to do research on it and put it next to do nuclear energy, so Moto will go to America to free his wife and form a family. At America, we know that the second egg hatched too, and another monster came out of it, and this monster was 3 or 4 times bigger than Moto, and once he came out of the egg, he was destroying anything in his way. And this monster doesn't have wings, and this way it's a female who Moto looking for here and sending her messages and waves. Later, Moto and his wife trying to meet and look for a big source of nuclear energy to form a family and put its eggs there. And at that time, a big army of children will come out of Moto. Then the leader thinks about his plan, that he brings a nuclear missile and puts it in a pot and lets the pot go away from the beach to keep the city away from any nuclear danger. And with this, Moto and his wife will go to the ocean and blow up the rocket. and Godzilla will be walking behind them, so they will get rid of all the monsters in one fell swoop without endangering human lives. But Shirwaza objected to this decision and told them that Godzilla is the only solution in front of them, and they can use him to help them against the monsters because he doesn't hurt people and has been living with them for a long time. And he thinks that they can let Godzilla kill Moto and his wife because this is the only hope in front of them. Also, Moto will not be affected by nuclear energy on the country. He will exploit it for his own benefit and absorb it. And this way, his power may increase exponentially and they will not be able to control him. But the leader objects to his opinion and starts to implement his decision and orders the forces to prepare the nuclear missile that will explode in the monsters. On the other hand, Ford arrives in America with the army and he knows about the appearance of the third monster. He also knows about the plan of the nuclear missile, so he goes and asks his commander to be in charge of the operation the missile and his capacity as explosives officer. So the officer agrees because his pre-sentence. Then Ford goes to call his wife to reassure her about himself. As soon as she hears his voice, she reassures because he hasn't talked to her since the day he traveled to Japan, and every day there was danger. She was very worried about him and started crying as soon as she heard his voice, but because there is no time, he tells her that he will go to her the next day to move them to another safe place because the monster will be there in the city. Later, the government orders the people in the San Francisco to leave the city, and because of that, there is a big traffic jam. At night, Ford and his colleagues go to transfer the nuclear missile to train, but they see a lot of fire coming out from nearby, so they know that the army is trying to kill the monsters. And when they call this team to reassure that nothing is in their way, they discover that the whole team died and the monsters whipped them out. So Ford and his colleague decide to walk on their feet to secure the place in front of them, and when they walk a little bit, they find the place safe. So they ask the team to move in the train, but suddenly the female monster appears and fights them. So they attack it, but of course its power is great, and also Moto appears and helps her. All that, and Ford and his colleagues pretend they are died. Though the female starts moving around them, but she doesn't see them and leave them and goes. Then Ford thinks at the time that they are finally safe, but all of a sudden they find the train coming toward them while it is on fire, so they run quickly to escape. At the time, the female monster sees them and kills Ford's colleagues. As for Ford, he jumps quickly in the water and saves himself, and he stands watching the female monster eating the nuclear missile. The next day, we see Ford full of mud and sleeping on the beach, and we discover that he is the only one in his team who stayed alive. Then he sees the army coming to the area to take the remaining missile, so he gets up quickly and goes to them, and they save him and take him with them. But his wife is in the hospital, worried about what's happening, and she finds all the people starting to move out of the city, but she decides not to leave and wait until Ford comes back, and after a while she feels a little fear, so she takes her son to her friend Laura in the bus to take him away from the area with her, and when Ford comes back, they will travel to here. As for Ford, he will have moved to California, and he finds the army preparing another bomb, but this time in the middle of the ocean. On the other side in San Francisco, we find the bridge full of cars, and the army is starting to concentrate on it to face Godzilla, which appears from the middle of water, and ships are moving next to it. But suddenly Godzilla changes direction and goes towards the bridge, but there are a lot of people still standing in cars. Among them is Sam, Ford's son. When the driver of the bus that has Sam finds the monster approaching them, he's running quickly by bus to escape, but one of the electricity cables falls and disables it. So Godzilla comes to the bridge and the army starts attacking it, and this makes him get angry and pull the electricity cables including the cables that broke down the bus, so the driver takes the opportunity and moves by bus immediately. But Godzilla after a while gets bored and heads towards the beach because he hears the sound of Moto there. As for the army, they would have reached the ocean and prepare the nuclear bomb that will explode in the monster, and they determine its timer. And while that, suddenly the power and electricity in the whole city goes off. Even the planes are starting to break down and fall, and the ship with the bomb on it is also breaking down, so they can move the bomb to the place of the monsters. And suddenly Moto appears from the sky and steals the nuclear bomb and take it to the female to give it to her. At that time, the big size difference between them appearing, but Moto is different from her in other things, like he can fly but she is not. Later, the female takes the bomb and sends it to her nest, and they are surprised that she made a nest in the middle of the city, and she sent them the bomb so that they feed on it. So the army then knows that there is a big problem, and they hold an emergency meeting to remove the bomb from the city, and we see them looking for an officer named Andrew. So Ford represented that officer and goes with them, and at that time they assign him to go with the team and deactivate the bomb in any way. So Ford agrees, but he stays worried. After the meeting is over, the leader comes out to stand with Shirawaza and asks him if Godzilla can handle this monster. So Shirawaza said that human beings have arrogance of greatness, and they imagined that they could control nature, but they didn't expect that nature would triumph over them in the end. And they must believe that as long as there is a monster, then the one who will be able to stand in front of him is a monster like him. So he's confident that the Godzilla can kill Moto easily. But that time, Godzilla arrived in town, and a fierce war is going on between him and Moto, and the female joins too to fight Godzilla and leave her nest. So this gives the army a chance to steal the bomb from the nest, and when Ford enters the nest, he's surprised that there are a lot of eggs, although his colleagues have already taken the bomb and will disable it. But he doesn't want to leave this nest as it is, because he's not sure Godzilla will destroy it too. So that's why he decided that he is the one who does this. So he emits a lot of gas in the place and escapes quickly, and as soon as the gasoline gets close to the fire, and the whole nest explodes. At the same time, the female is busy with the war with Godzilla, and when she sees her nest burning, she comes back to reassure her children, and at the time, she finds them all dead. So she gets angry and starts looking for who did this to them. But at the time, Godzilla starts fighting with her and beats her, and here Moto intervenes and starts to fight Godzilla. So the female noted that the soldiers, while they are smuggling the bomb, so she runs after them and kills them on the basis that they were the ones who killed her children. Then Godzilla kills Moto, but there is a big building that falls on it and breaks it, and he can't get up. And he sees Ford, so he looks at him as if they are transferring messages to each other. As for Ford, he sees the female monster killing his colleagues. That's why he goes to the boat to move away. And when he looks at the bomb, he discovers that there is only a little time, but he will not know how to disrupt it, and he must stay away from the city quickly. And this is considered a suicide mission. At that time, the female of the monster attacks him, but suddenly Godzilla appears behind her and shines his beam on her head, so he cuts her. So the power returns again to the city and the ship, with Ford on it, and he moves fast in the boat to the furthest direction, but he faints on the way. But a very big light appears in the front of him, and his colleagues come out to save him from the explosion. The second day in the morning, they find Godzilla sleeping on the floor, and he almost died. So people gathered in the stadium to be treated, and everyone starts looking for his family, including Ford and his son Sam, but they don't find his wife, and they think that she's dead. And suddenly Sam returns, so they see her from afar coming to them, and they finally meet after a lot of troubles. But while they are sitting, they find Godzilla on TV while he's alive, and stand on his feet again in front of the people. This makes Dr. Shirwaza happy because his point of view was right, and Godzilla turned out to be a hero to them. But Godzilla doesn't stay much on the ground and comes back to the water, amidst the basil of the people and their love for him. And that's our movie ends today. You love action, suspense, mystery, we have it, although exists in the common many. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and that's it, bye.